Elijah Turner had just returned from studying abroad, eager to finally experience the Grand Palace Hotel, the very embodiment of luxury that his mother, Olivia Turner, had built from the ground up. Though he had seen this magnificent establishment featured in countless magazines and high-profile business articles, this would be his first time setting foot inside as a guest. Years spent overseas had only deepened his admiration for his mother's legacy, and now, standing before the towering structure, he felt a surge of pride. The Grand Palace gleamed under the afternoon sun, its marble pillars exuding an air of timeless elegance. Through the towering glass windows, the grand chandelier shimmered like captured stardust, a beacon of opulence. A plush red carpet stretched from the entrance into the heart of the grand lobby, welcoming guests who moved about with effortless grace, their laughter hushed, their gestures refined. Every detail spoke of wealth and privilege. Elijah rolled his suitcase across the pristine marble floors, his heart swelling with anticipation. He expected nothing less than the impeccable service such a prestigious hotel was known for, the kind of treatment befitting its grandeur. Yet the moment he stepped inside, something felt off. It wasn't the ambiance or the extravagance. It was the way people looked at him, the subtle, flickering glances, the brief hesitation before the doorman pushed open the glass doors, the bellhop who glanced at his luggage, then turned away as if assuming his assistance would not be required. Behind the front desk, the staff continued their work without acknowledgement, their faces impassive. Elijah straightened his posture, his confidence unwavering as he approached the reception desk. Seated there was Amanda Blake, the hotel manager, a woman in her early 40s, dressed impeccably in a navy blue suit. Her expression was one of practiced professionalism, her eyes fixated on the computer screen before her. She did not immediately look up as Elijah stopped before her. "Excuse me," he said, offering a polite smile. "I have a reservation under Elijah Turner." Finally, Amanda's eyes flickered toward him, assessing him with a glance that was almost clinical. She took in his designer sneakers, his tailored trousers, his crisp shirt. Yet when her gaze landed on his skin, something in her expression shifted, so fleeting it might have been imperceptible to anyone who wasn't paying attention. A flicker of skepticism, a coolness that hadn't been there a moment before. "You're sure you're in the right place?" she asked, her voice professional, but laced with an unmistakable undertone of doubt. Elijah's patience did not waver. "I believe so," he replied smoothly, retrieving his phone from his pocket. "This is the Grand Palace, correct? Here's my confirmation." Amanda took the phone from him with a swift, almost dismissive motion. She barely glanced at the screen before shoving it back into his hands, her expression unreadable. She murmured, her fingers moving over the keyboard, slow and deliberate, too slow, as if searching for an excuse rather than a solution. Meanwhile, other guests checked in seamlessly. Key cards were handed out with warm smiles. Luggage was carried off by attentive bellhops. Time passed, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. Yet Elijah remained standing there, waiting. "Is there a problem?" he asked at last, his voice measured but firm. Amanda barely glanced up. "It seems I can't find your reservation in our system," she said, her tone cool, detached. "Are you sure you booked here?" Elijah inhaled slowly, keeping his voice steady. "I have a confirmation email. Would you like to see it again?" Amanda let out a small sigh, irritation flickering across her face. "That won't be necessary," she said after a long pause. "However, we don't allow walk-ins for high-tier suites." Elijah's jaw tightened. The assumption was absurd. His voice was sharp with conviction. "I'm not a walk-in. I made a reservation." Under Elijah Turner, Amanda's lips curved into a thin, insincere smile. "I don't see it in the system," she replied. "Perhaps you should check another hotel." The words struck like a slap, not because of their content, but because of what they truly meant. Elijah had been dismissed, labeled, reduced to nothing more than an outsider in a place where he had every right to be. Without another word, he turned and took a seat in the grand lobby. He would wait. As the minutes crawled by, the world around him moved on, oblivious. Guests checked in with ease, their conversations light and filled with laughter. Bellhops rushed past, catering to every whim of the well-dressed patrons. The clinking of glasses from the nearby bar punctuated the quiet murmur of wealth and entitlement. And yet, in the midst of it all, Elijah sat alone, unseen. Employees walked by without acknowledgement. A waiter drifted between tables, offering drinks, but never once glancing his way. The staff carried on as though he did not exist. Guests stole brief glances in his direction before quickly averting their eyes. An hour passed. Elijah stood dusting invisible lint from his trousers and walked back to the front desk. Amanda was still there, her attention fixed on the computer screen. He cleared his throat. "I've been waiting for over an hour," he said, his voice calm but edged with steel. "Please check my reservation again." Amanda finally looked up, and for the first time she seemed mildly surprised by his persistence. Yet her expression quickly smoothed back into calculated indifference. "I still don't see it," she said, her tone clipped. "Maybe you've mistaken this hotel for somewhere else." Elijah took a slow breath, his frustration simmering beneath his composed exterior. "I am not mistaken," he said, his voice even. "Check it again, properly." But Amanda merely returned her focus to the screen, her fingers tapping idly at the keys, too leisurely, too deliberately. Elijah watched her stall, watched as other guests were accommodated without question. A businessman was checked in within moments. A family of 4 greeted warmly and escorted to their suite. The difference was glaring. Elijah had waited long enough. He straightened, his voice like ice. "I've been patient. Either you check my reservation properly, or you provide a legitimate explanation for this treatment." Amanda blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. Then, regaining her composure, she offered another dismissive smile. "You can wait in the lobby while I check again." Elijah exhaled slowly, his fists clenching at his sides. Without another word, he turned and walked away. The stares followed him, the whispers barely concealed. Yet he held his head high. He had nothing to prove. 0749. Time stretched. The quiet rejection weighed heavier with each passing moment, and still he waited. 9:29. Then at last, Amanda's voice cut through the tension. "You're still here?" she asked, her irritation barely masked. "I told you it might take a while. We have strict policies." Elijah said nothing. He didn't need to. Her actions had already spoken louder than words. And then, as if to drive the point home, a new couple arrived. Amanda's expression transformed instantly. Warm, inviting. Within moments, they were handed their key cards with a smile. Elijah sat back, his heart pounding. This was not about policy. It never had been. The contrast was undeniable. Elijah remained standing, waiting, the silence around him stretching unbearably. Not a single word had been directed his way. No acknowledgement, no explanation, just cold indifference. The longer he stood there, the more the weight of the injustice pressed down on him. He had done nothing wrong. He was merely a guest, yet the assumptions about him, about whether he belonged, were being laid bare in the most humiliating way. Minutes stretched into what felt like an eternity. A quiet humiliation settled in his chest, twisting into something sharp and heavy. The lobby, a place meant to exude luxury and comfort, had transformed into a cage. He had seen this before. The way people hesitated, the way their eyes skimmed past him, the way they treated him differently, not because of anything he had done, but because of who they assumed he was. It was a script he knew by heart, one that played out over and over, and yet no amount of familiarity dulled its sting. Finally, enough was enough. Elijah straightened, his body aching from the prolonged wait, and strode purposefully to the front desk. His voice was measured but firm. "I've waited long enough. Either check my reservation properly, or I need an explanation." Amanda, the receptionist, barely spared him a glance. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, her eyes fixed on the screen as though he were an afterthought. "As I said, we're very busy," she replied, her voice dripping with insincerity. "Maybe you should check somewhere else." His patience frayed. This was no longer about a simple reservation. It was about dignity, about respect, about the way people like him were so often dismissed, overlooked, treated as though their very presence was an inconvenience. He clenched his jaw, willing himself to remain calm, but the injustice burned beneath his skin. Then, as if on cue, the heavy doors of the Grand Palace Hotel swung open with an almost theatrical force. The air in the lobby shifted instantly, the murmurs of guests and staff faltering into silence. A presence had arrived. Veronica Turner entered the space with an elegance that demanded attention. She moved with the quiet authority of someone who never had to ask for respect. It was simply given. The striking crimson power suit she wore was more than attire. It was armor. It clung to her frame with effortless precision, exuding strength, control, and an unshakable confidence. The sharp click of her heels against the marble floor echoed through the room, slicing through the tension like a blade. Elijah recognized her immediately, though he had only seen her in passing, in boardrooms and on magazine covers. Veronica Turner, Olivia Turner, his mother, the woman who had built an empire with sheer determination, whose vision had shaped the very foundations of the Grand Palace Hotel. Her gaze, dark as polished onyx, swept over the room with the precision of a predator, missing nothing, missing no one. Amanda Blake, who had been so unyielding just moments ago, went rigid, her entire body locked into place, as if she had just realized the perilous ground she stood on. She had underestimated Elijah, dismissed him, and now the owner of the very empire she worked for had arrived to see her failure firsthand. Veronica didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to demand silence. Her presence alone commanded it. When her eyes landed on Amanda, the weight of her gaze was enough to send a shiver through the staff. Amanda's fingers twitched over the keyboard, her composure cracking under the intensity of the moment. Her voice was even, but there was something in its measured calm that was far more dangerous than anger. It was the voice of a woman who knew her power and knew exactly how to wield it. The words, so effortlessly spoken, sent an unmistakable message. This would not be ignored. Elijah stood just behind her, watching as the balance of power shifted. The weight that had sat heavy on his chest lifted, just slightly, at the sight of his mother stepping into the role she had perfected. Unyielding, immovable, relentless. Amanda swallowed hard, visibly flustered, but tried to regain control. "I was simply following protocol," she stammered. "There was no reservation under Mr. Turner's name. I assumed—" "You assumed," Veronica cut in, her voice razor sharp. "You assumed incorrectly." Amanda paled. The hotel staff, who had once pretended not to see, now stood frozen, eyes darting nervously between their superior and the woman who had just dismantled any illusion of control Amanda once had. Veronica continued, her tone unwavering. "This is Elijah Turner, my son, and you left him sitting here for over an hour, treating him as though he were an outsider." A ripple of discomfort passed through the staff. No one dared to move. No one dared to speak. The realization of the moment sank in like a stone dropped into water, sending waves through the air. "I'm not interested in excuses, Amanda," Veronica pressed. "I'm interested in an explanation." Amanda opened her mouth, but no words came. There was no explanation that would suffice. The truth was laid bare now, undeniable and damning. Elijah exhaled slowly. He had endured enough, and he had no intention of letting this be swept aside, like so many moments before. But as he looked at his mother, he saw something more than just anger. He saw a force of change. Veronica turned, addressing the staff now, her voice ringing through the lobby with a quiet, unmistakable authority. "Starting tomorrow morning, every employee, from the front desk to management, will undergo mandatory training on bias, discrimination, and customer service ethics. If anyone refuses to participate, they will no longer be employed here." A hush fell over the room, the reality of the moment sinking in. This was no temporary reprimand. This was a reckoning. She turned to the security guards who had been summoned earlier. "Tell me," she asked, her gaze flicking between them, "when Amanda asked you to remove Elijah, did you question it?" Neither of them spoke. Their shame was evident in the way they shifted uncomfortably, their eyes refusing to meet hers. "That's the problem," Veronica continued. "You didn't question it. You simply assumed she was right. That will not happen again. If fairness and respect are too much to ask of you, then you are not welcome here." She turned back to Amanda, who looked as if she had just realized the full weight of her mistake. "You have 10 minutes to clear out your office," Veronica said, her voice like steel. "If you are still here after that, security will escort you out." Amanda's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, scrambling for words, but Veronica silenced her with a single glance. "Leave." And just like that, it was over. Amanda turned stiffly, her humiliation evident, and walked away. The moment she disappeared through the employee corridor, the air in the lobby shifted. Staff and guests alike breathed out, as if the weight of the moment had finally lifted. Veronica turned to Elijah then, her fierce gaze softening. "Are you all right?" He nodded, though the sting of what had happened still lingered. "I am now." Her lips pressed together briefly in understanding, before she gave a small nod. "Let's go. You've waited long enough." Together they walked toward the elevator, a silent promise hanging between them. The Grand Palace Hotel would never be the same again, and neither would the people within it.